Welcome to Midlife Mayhem, the place where we stop blaming age, hormones, and a slow metabolism for everything, and we actually do something about it. I am Joanne Lee Cornish, former professional bodybuilder, body composition coach, and slightly obsessed midlife science nerd. My mission here is simple: to teach you the real physiology behind fat loss, muscle, hormones, and metabolism at midlife. Without the fluff, without the gimmicks, and without talking to you like you're fragile or that you are broken, because you are neither. I'll give you the exact science and strategy so that you can become the outlier, the one who looks and feels better at 50, 60 and beyond than you did in your 30s, while everyone else is calling it normal aging. And if you're listening and thinking, okay, that's great, but I don't want to just understand this. I want a plan. I want a coach in my corner. Well, that is exactly what I do. I run online coaching programs, live classes, and I have an elite 10-month program starting in February. Simply go to joannelee.com or click the link in every show note. Okay, let's get started. Hello. We are in Christmas week, just a few days until Christmas, which means it's just a few weeks until my program starts. So, gosh, I have got quite the schedule. You can see my schedule by looking in the show notes, but if you want to see it, just look for joannelee2026.com and you'll see my schedule there. But we are going to kick off the year with my 5-day peak week shred. 5-day, what is it? 5dayshred.com. That's it. The number 5dayshred.com. So that's going to run from January the 12th to the 18th, a 5-day diet, a week-long program, 4 coaching calls. It's absolutely awesome. I'm always asked to repeat it. But when you look at my schedule, right now, January is the only time I'm going to do it. Now, I'm not going to say I'm not going to do it again, but it won't come around till very late in the year. So if you want to jump in on that, it's really, really awesome. Yes, weight loss, but it's so much more than that. Anyway, go check it out. And if you want to join, then hop on in. If you would like to enjoy a 10% discount, you will have to join before January the 1st and use the discount code PEAK, P-E-A-K. And you'll get 10% off. So jump on in. Great way to start the year. Right after that, we've got the Victory Vault. And then the whole year starts going. And ladies, I'm looking for 10 ladies to join me in a perfect 10. My 10-month coaching program, which is going to start on March 1st. It's my most immersive, most aggressive, honestly, coaching program that I've ever offered. I mean, to me, it's looking at probably 50 to 60 extra hours of work a month. And it's a much higher ticket price. But if your level of commitment is up there and you want that level of coaching, then please email me and I can send you details and we can set up a call. But what are we going to talk about today? I've got a whole list of things I want to talk about. But then I was looking at my desk and I'm looking at this stale cup of coffee in front of me. And I thought, you know what? I haven't talked about adenosine. Well, I haven't talked about coffee, and to talk about coffee, you have to talk about adenosine. So today, let's wing this one and let's talk about adenosine, tiredness, and, why the day naturally winds down. How does that even happen? So before we even talk about coffee, we have to talk about adenosine, because this is the system that controls our natural tiredness. So adenosine builds up in the brain the longer that we're awake. It's not something that body releases on purpose. It's actually a byproduct of using energy. So every time our brain works, every time we focus, we move, we think, we stay alert, we burn energy. And one of the byproducts of burning energy is this adenosine. So the more we work, the more energy we burn, this adenosine slowly accumulates. It slowly builds up. And as adenosine builds up, it starts attaching to receptors in the brain. And when enough of those receptors are occupied, the message becomes very clear, and the message is, "Hey, it's time to slow down. It's time to wind down." It's that heavy-eyed feeling in the evening. It's that drop of motivation, that sense that your brain just doesn't want to do one more thing. This is when adenosine is doing its job. So when we talk about energy, we're talking about ATP here, adenosine triphosphate, and that ATP, those of you that did my Muscle Month program or Mastering Midlife, you know this. But it's the ATP is the cellular energy of our body, and we really, really need to understand what ATP is. So if you think about the electricity in your house. You need that electricity to turn the lights on, for this microphone to work, my computer to work, the fridge to work, the TV to work, et cetera, et cetera. So the energy currency of my home is is electricity. Well, the energy currency of our body is ATP. It's everything. I mean, it's if you don't have ATP, lights go out. I mean, you're not going to blink, you're not going to see, you're not going to have a heartbeat, you're not going to have a thought. Nothing's going to work if ATP quits. So ATP is really, really important to understand. And it's one of the reasons that I coach so much of it in the Mastering Midlife program, because a lot of the issues with midlife are due to energy production on a cellular level. So when we think of energy, a lot of people think, oh, if I'm awake or tired, or my energy to run or walk. We're not talking about that energy. I'm talking about energy like the electricity in your house, the energy currency needed for your body to actually function. And that production of ATP can get very mismanaged and impaired in midlife. And that's a very big reason why so many problems turn up in midlife and beyond. And honestly, it's quite, we can really, really, really improve cellular health in 2 to 3 weeks. But I'm getting off the subject. 1 second, I'm going to sneeze. There could well be another sneeze. Okay. So it sounds like I went off on a tangent like I usually do, but I actually didn't, because when ATP is made, one of the byproducts of ATP is adenosine. And adenosine is constantly being produced as energy is being produced because it's a byproduct, and it builds up. And because it attaches to receptors, once those receptors are kind of occupied, think of it like flipping out. I'm usually pretty good in analogies, but think of it like musical chairs. Once all the chairs are occupied, the message is pretty clear. Like it's time to slow down. Your body gets tired, your motivation goes down, your drive goes down, and that's kind of the natural way that the day's meant to go. So if in the late evening, you're not accomplishing all the things you said you were going to do in the morning, it's not really your weakness. It's just adenosine doing its job, because it builds up. It builds up as the day goes on. So what has coffee got to do with this? Well, caffeine, I think this is where most people get things wrong. They think caffeine gives us energy. They think caffeine fixes fatigue. But it doesn't. That's not what it is. The way that caffeine works is it blocks the adenosine receptors. So remembering that adenosine, this byproduct that eventually makes us tired at the end of the day, occupies receptors. And when all the receptors are kind of occupied, the message is, hey, I'm tired, get yourself to bed. But what happens with coffee or caffeine is it blocks the adenosine receptors. So if it's blocking the adenosine receptors, the adenosine has nowhere to go, right? So caffeine is blocking those adenosine receptors. So adenosine is still there, but it can't attach. So the brain doesn't receive the signal of tiredness in the same way. So you don't suddenly have more energy. You've just silenced the message that says that you're running low on energy. Does that make sense? That's why coffee can make you feel alert and exhausted at the same time. It's why also the tiredness can come back later, not all at once, and not a gradual. When people say they crash, that's what can happen instead of the natural fatigue that should come with adenosine production. So that's how caffeine is working. It's blocking the adenosine receptors. Well, if adenosine can't attach to its receptors, adenosine has to attach to its receptors for us to get naturally tired, but coffee is blocking them, then adenosine can't do its job. Okay, so what about, so adenosine, therefore, is the system that slows us down. But what's the system that wakes us up? There's always a yin for a yang, always. Every hormone has its counterpart. So what is the counterpart of adenosine? So if the adenosine is the system that naturally slows us down, then what is the one that wakes us up? Well, that would be cortisol. So cortisol is a system that wakes us up. And those of you that have done my Mastering Midlife program, you know what the cortisol curve usually looks like. So cortisol naturally rises in the morning. That's why if you do a cortisol test, if you just do one test, they're going to test you about between 7 and 8 in the morning. And if they see an issue with that, and then they're going to do a full cortisol test where you probably test yourself 7 times in a day. But usually, if we're looking for a cortisol issue, the first thing that they'll do is just do a one test, and that'll be at 7 o'clock in the morning, because that's when cortisol is naturally high. It's naturally high in the morning because that's where we're meant to be waking up. Now, what if we add caffeine on top of this? So think about this. Yeah, 7-ish in the morning, okay? Cortisol is naturally high, naturally waking us up. And we drink a coffee, and the caffeine blocks the adenosine. So we're blocking the adenosine receptor. Remember, adenosine calms us down. So caffeine is blocking the adenosine receptor whilst stimulating cortisol at the same time. For some people, this feels like a real clean energy. Like, I'm awake, I am bouncing off the walls. For other people, especially people in midlife and beyond, it feels like anxiety, it feels jittery, it feels wired but tired type of thing. And the difference usually isn't the coffee, it's what the nervous system was already dealing with before the coffee arrived. Does that make sense? Why then do some people, I could say myself included, well, I don't know if I can say myself included. Well, why do people get a tolerance to coffee? Why can they drink it and go to bed kind of thing? Well, the tolerance builds over time. And when that caffeine is blocking the adenosine receptors, and they're blocked over and over and over again, like every day they are blocked. Well, what happens is the brain just adapts. It's like, well, hold on, the adenosine is not able to do here. If these receptors are continually going to get blocked, then we're just going to have to make more of them. So over time, you develop more adenosine receptors. That's why the same amount of coffee stops working. That's why a tolerance can build up. That's why you can need more coffee to get the same hit. Because remember, if the caffeine is attaching to and blocking the adenosine receptor, yeah, but now you have more receptors, it's going to take more coffee to do that job. So it's nothing broken. This is just an adaptation that the brain's like, hey, we can need adenosine to work here. And if it's always getting blocked, then hey ho, clever bugger, host, you say, I'll just make more receptors. So what then, if you're listening to me now, you're like, whoa, I'm going to protect my adenosine receptors, and you suddenly stop caffeine after years, or in my case, decades of use. So if there's no caffeine, then all those receptors, the adenosine now has plenty of receptors to attach to, loads of receptors to attach to. So now people can feel that heavy feeling. They can feel foggy, headachy. They can feel like they've been hit by a truck. Now, that phase does pass. The brain just says, I mean, our body is so much smarter than our dumb actions. The brain just adjusts back. But in midlife, it takes a little bit longer than people to expect. And that delay in reverting back is sometimes too hard for people to tolerate. I mean, I personally would not like to go more than a few days without coffee. I don't want to go. Who am I kidding? I don't want to go a morning without coffee. Could I? Absolutely. when I have done so in the past, for like some blood work in particular, I've felt incredibly calm, but I've been as about as much use as a chocolate teapot. I mean, yeah, I wasn't really much used for anything at first. But that phase, if you did want to drop caffeine, it does pass. But at first, that's why you feel so exhausted, really heavy in the brain, because that's where it's coming from. But it does pass. It's just if you have the desire to get through that phase. So what else? What else? What about the thyroid medication? Now, I touched on this right at the end. I did a very long podcast on something completely different. And right at the end, I mentioned a thyroid interaction. I should have probably made it its own podcast. But what about if you're taking thyroid medication? And, you'll always hear the doctor say, oh, make sure you take your thyroid an hour before your coffee. And, for some of us, like, there's nothing happening before I do my coffee. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning or earlier. There's nothing going on before I do my coffee, but I jest. But this is why thyroid medication, especially T3, which is the active form of thyroid, and it hits really hard, really quick. That's why you're advised for it to be taken away from coffee. Coffee is going to reduce the absorption of your T3 in the gut, so you're going to get inconsistent hormone levels. But there's also the stimulation issue. So the thyroid hormone already speeds things up, and especially T3. So T4, inactive prohormone, T3, the active available hormone of thyroid. T3 can hit hard. Like within 2 or 3 hours, it can hit pretty hard. And as I mentioned in a prior podcast, right at the end of the podcast, I was saying how women in midlife can, even though they've been taking thyroid medication for decades, they can become super sensitive to that thyroid medication in midlife. And the way that that shows up is they're wired and tired. They're super buzzy in the morning and they crash in the afternoon. And they don't think it's their thyroid because, they've been taking the thyroid for 20, 30 years or something. So that's not even on their radar. But what is happening, with what can be happening, is the lady can become more sensitive to the thyroid that she's taking, especially the T3. If that sounds like you, just don't take your thyroid medication for one day and see if you feel calmer. See if that afternoon crash doesn't happen. If it doesn't, then talk to your health professional about your thyroid medication. You maybe become super sensitive to it. Now, I see this all the time. Well, I should say I'm seeing this more and more. That's what I should say. And I think that's because I'm getting older, my clients are getting older, so this is coming up more and more. As a 35-year-old coach, I didn't really hear about this much, but as a 58-year-old coach, I'm hearing this more and more. I'm hearing the complaint like I am just crashing in the afternoon. I am just destroyed in the afternoon. And the blame goes to, I need testosterone or something like this, or I'm just this menopause is crushing me. And very often it is a sensitivity to a thyroid medication, which they might have been taken for years, decades, in fact. So thyroid already speeds things up. So you're taking thyroid in the morning, which is going to speed things up. You're drinking your coffee, which is blocking the adenosine and pushes cortisol. Together, this can all feel like just way, way, way too much first thing in the morning. And this is where people can find themselves tired when they wake up. Then once they've had the coffee and the thyroid med and the cortisol kicks in, they are bouncing off the walls. Too much energy, a shaky, wide, anxious feeling, and then kaboom, an almighty crash in the afternoon. So, I mean, I think Uberman's done 754 podcasts on this. A joke. But I mean, a lot of influencers have already spoken at nauseum about, oh, the morning sunlight and the morning coffee. And when you get up in the dark like me, it kind of falls flat. Sounds very idyllic, but I joke because I get up in the dark. It's totally by choice. So don't listen to me being a little victim of it. But, not everybody is getting up in the morning and getting some red light in their eyes. A lot of people are getting up and pounding the streets within 45 minutes of waking up. But it is by the by, that our body doesn't kind of adapt to our schedule, but that can be what's going on. A combination of the cortisol hitting usually around 7 o'clock in the morning. That's coupled with somebody's morning coffee and maybe a thyroid med that they're not going to take earlier because, they just haven't got time, and they all hit. Thyroid hits, cortisol hits. The caffeine is blocking the adenosine receptor. Adenosine makes us, is our natural calming byproduct. That's not happening. And people are just wired. But not everybody. Why is it that some people respond so differently to caffeine? So some people feel nothing at all. Nothing. And that can well be because, their system has just adapted that they just don't get anything anymore. So again, the body's just making more and more adenosine receptors, and that coffee just doesn't hit that hard. I mean, I'm sure that's why I will not do powdered coffee. I don't do the pod. I do French press, and I'm pretty sure that's why, because I know my French press. I enjoy it, but I know it because it hits harder. I think the average coffee drinker, if they drank my French press, it might hit pretty hard. I'm only laughing because I'm looking at my coffee cup and it looks like an inkwell, but anyway. So some people have a tolerance and some people can't tolerate even a sip because their stress load is already so high. And blocking adenosine would even push their anxiety even higher. So imagine you've got somebody very stressed out for whatever reason. It can be mental, physical, it can be lack of sleep, environmental, whatever it is, but in a high stress load, already highly stressed. And then caffeine blocks the adenosine receptor, and adenosine is a thing that calms us down during the day. Not good. Not good. Even a sip of coffee is just going to push that anxiety through the roof. And that is, I know, why some people say, I just have to get off coffee for a while. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. Again, it's not because it's the stimulant, it's because it's blocking that adenosine receptor, and adenosine is there to calm us down. And then there's the people that drink coffee before going to bed and they still fall asleep. Now, that doesn't mean that was Kevin, 2 cups of coffee every night. And he sleeps pretty well, but my argument always with, you could sleep better. You could. And he does. So he moved up to decaf and he does sleep better. So even if you're drinking coffee at night and you think, I can drink coffee and go to sleep, if you're drinking coffee within 8 hours of going to bed, it is affecting your sleep. It is. So coffee is not really about so much of a stimulation. It's more about the brain managing adenosine. It's about its relationship and its timing with cortisol, and it may be because of the relationship between cortisol, caffeine, adenosine, and maybe even thyroid. And in midlife, that balance can change. Your sensitivity to thyroid can change. Our cortisol can already be through the roof and elevated, and you want to add a cup of coffee to that, it can be a significant change in your life experience. Now, do I say you cut your coffee out? I would address the stress level first, because the stress level is, that's what's really making things bad. Certainly wouldn't be the first thing to cut my coffee out, but I would be looking at, if it's a thyroid thing, I would be having a conversation about that. But if it is an elevated cortisol thing, that's what I would be addressing first. But it might mean cutting coffee out for a little while whilst you address the cortisol. Also, understanding liver health, which I talk about in my Immersive Midlife program, but, cortisol is actually broken down into its inactive form in your liver. So if your liver's not doing well, then, well, I should back up. In your liver, inactive thyroid is being converted into the active form, and the inactive form of cortisol is being broken down into the inactive form. Let me just say that again. T4, prohormone for thyroid, is converted into the active form of thyroid, T3, in the liver. And cortisol, the active form of cortisol, is broken down in the liver. So if your liver's not doing well, it's a whole mess. So in your blood work, you look for your AST and your ALT. You look at your triglyceride level, because if your liver's not working well, then thyroid's impacted, cortisol is impacted, and body composition is majorly impacted. And I talk about the liver a lot in quite a few of my programs, actually. But there I go again, totally off subject. I was talking about coffee, and I was talking about adenosine. And the point I want to get across is coffee works because it blocks adenosine receptors. Adenosine is what builds up during the day and makes us calm. But what it does is adenosine attaches to receptors. Well, if those receptors are already filled with caffeine, then adenosine can't attach. And that's what can be keeping us feeling wired. And it's also can be the reason that we crash so hard later in the day rather than a smooth landing. I'm going to leave it there because I think the last 2 podcasts I did were like almost an hour. And I saw when I started this, like, I'm not going to be this 3-hour podcast. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to hijack you. So just a quick one right now on adenosine. And a reminder that 5-day peak week shred starts on January the 12th. And straight after that, I think it's on January the 26th, I'm going to run the 2-week program, which is the Victory Vault. The Victory Vault is only run once a year. It's a quick 2-week course. There's homework in the Victory Vault. The Victory Vault is about, if you have goals or desires for this upcoming year, it's about identifying who you need to be in order to achieve either your goals or your desires for the year. So what I mean by that is, often people have goals and they write them out and they're measurable and all this, and they've done all these goals, blah, blah, blah. But they've never addressed who they need to be to achieve these goals. And so the goals don't work. They've got them mapped out, they've got them timed out, they've got affirmations, but they have never addressed who they need to be. What personality traits do they need? What standards do they need to have for themselves? What disciplines? What they need to give up in order to achieve or in order to have success in any realm in 2026. So the Victory Vault it started off at 16, but I think now it's 20 different topics that we're really looking at ourselves. It's identifying, if you haven't got a goal, you don't have to have a goal to start. You can just come in because you want a successful year, and it's addressing and it's peeling away, taking an ugly look at ourselves and saying, hey, what do we need to change and what needs to come in? And you know what comes with that? We like ourselves. We like ourselves. We believe in ourselves. We become the person that we know can achieve the goals, but we have to do the dirty work first. So it's an awesome program. I don't think I described it very well. It's only 2 weeks. I do it at the beginning of the year. There is homework. People that have done the Victory Vault in prior years, I have their homework from prior years, so I can bring that up. You can share it with me if you want to, or you can keep it for yourself in a journal. But at the end of the Victory Vault, you will have a very, very clear plan of behaviors, standards, principles that you're going to live by with the year coming up. We're going to talk about how you benefit, how other people benefit, and it's going to give you, there's going to be an ease to the year once we've done this work. This podcast came out of the Victory Vault. I would have been procrastinating about this for another year, but when I declared it in the Victory Vault and I said what I needed to do for this to happen, and it was up and running, and here I am, I think 105 episodes in. A lot of great things have come out of Victory Vault, but it's doing some ugly work. So that is also coming up in January, 2-week program. That's it. Will not come back till January of 2026. And the link will be in the show notes, or you can just look up yourvictoryvault.com. All right, that's it for now. What am I going to talk about next? I'm going to talk about, I think, food sensitivities and how they change in midlife. That's something that's come up in a couple of my clients in the last week. So let's do that next. Guys, my programs are all about to start. Joanne Lee 2026. If you have any questions, let me know. If you do want to be one of the 10 ladies for the perfect 10-month program, If you're willing to make that commitment on every level, then I would really, really like to talk to you, because that is something that I really want to do. I've always wanted to coach in that manner. I've always wanted that level of coaching for that length of time. And you know what's been interesting? I haven't really talked about this program so much because my new website's been getting built. And it's built. There's just a lot of things I need to change on it. It looks great, but I just need to change a lot of the videos and photographs and things like that. So I didn't really want to talk about it until I had my website up, but I kind of told people about it by email and on the podcast. And what has really encouraged me is so many women would like to do that program. Now, I know some ladies won't be able to give that level of commitment for the 10 months. Some women won't be able to give that financial commitment for the 10 months. But what it encourages me is that people want to do a 10-month program. And I wasn't sure that people did. So that really, really encourages me to make this work in whatever form it needs to be. Because as a coach, when I run month-long programs, it's great, but I feel like I just got going. And then people come back and do a program later on, and I just feel like it's very disjointed. I just didn't. I wasn't sure that anybody wanted to commit for 10 months. So I'm super encouraged by so many women contacting me that is what they want. That's pretty cool. Anyway, that one will start March 1st because the website's not up yet. Guys, it is December the 20th. Christmas is coming up. If you celebrate Christmas, have a wonderful Christmas. Otherwise, a wonderful, wonderful, every joy, every blessing for 2026. Thanks for listening to Midlife Mayhem. And remember, midlife isn't something to be scared of, but it is something to be respected. It's not the decline that everybody expects. It's the opportunity to take full control. And it's actually the final and last real opportunity that we have to become an outlier in midlife and beyond. If you're ready to do that with me, join one of my live coaching programs, do one of my self-study programs, or apply for the 10-month elite program, which starts in February. Head over to joannelee.com or email me directly at joanne@joannelee.com. Thanks so much for joining me today.